So, what are we going to talk about today? You might be asking yourself. Yeah, let's just dive in. Let's just see what happens. Sonnet 2, here we go. Nothing highbrow here. This is low-hanging Shakespeare. Hey, welcome back to Low-Hanging Shakespeare. Let's talk about Sonnet 2. This is a very cold read for me. I haven't looked at this sonnet in several years, probably. Maybe I looked at it sometime in 2020. Oh God, it's 2022. Several years. That was correct. So just like we did with Sonnet 1, we're going to go through line by line and put it into our own words. As I go line by line, I'm going to make note of any interesting scanning or interesting rhyme. First things first, I have to read this. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed of small worth held. Then, being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use, if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by succession thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. Okay, we've got some work to do. I don't know about you. I think I probably understood maybe half of it. Probably. So we've got a little bit of work to do here to understand the other half. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow. 40 winters. Every year has a winter, so I think we can safely say 40 years is what we mean by 40 winters. Besiege thy brow. I love the idea of besieging a brow. So to lay siege on something or to do battle with it, to just attack and attack and attack. We're talking about the brow here. We're talking about after 40 years, what happens to a person's face? It's besieged by time. Time essentially battles with our faces. It makes us, in some cases, less attractive. Other cases, we're like wine. So, not a universal truth here. After 40 years, when you've got some wrinkles, let's go with that. When you're all wrinkly in 40 years. Before we move on to the second line, I want to point out besiege and brow. We've got that nice nice alliteration there. It's good. If you're just watching along, I invite you to say that sequence out loud. Besiege thy brow. It feels good. I dare you to do it. And dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field. So just like how the winters are besieging a brow, we've now got the field that is our beauty. And as time goes on, it's getting trenches put in it. Wrinkles, again, we're talking about wrinkles, we're talking about trenches. So these are deep wrinkles in our beauty's field. So the second line is just a continuation of the first. 40 years from now, after time has done a number on your face and your whole beauty is just wrinkles now. And all your hotness is gone. Thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now. The fancy clothes that you're wearing right now that everyone looks at will be a tattered weed of small worth held. Weed, it means clothes. So it is a term that we do still have, but it's not used very often. It just means clothes. So we had livery in the last line, and we have weeds in this line. So your clothes that look nice now are going to be tattered and worthless. Something interesting that I want to look at in this first quatrain is the rhyme. In the first line and the third line, we have brow and now for end rhyme, which is interesting. It's not interesting. They just rhyme. But the second and the fourth line, shit don't rhyme. Field and held. Now, I bet those used to rhyme, maybe in the original pronunciation. Then being asked where all thy beauty lies. This line, I think, is pretty straightforward. So when somebody asks you what happened to your hotness, when someone asks why you got ugly, where all the treasure of thy lusty days? Lusty, interesting word, means youthful, but it has a fun double meaning to modern audiences. Lusty. Which I think plays pretty well. I think it makes sense. If you're talking about youthfulness as lusty and our modern meaning of lust and lustful, it makes sense because you are probably more into doing lustful activities when you're youthful. So to me, the step from youthful to sexually interested, I would guess, it's an easy leap, I think. Where is that youthful glow that you used to have? So this one's kind of hard to go line by line because this isn't a full thought. These 4 lines here are all one sentence. They're all one thought. So let's look at the next 2 lines together and it'll make a lot more sense. To say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. The first 2 lines ask, if somebody asks you why you're not hot anymore, what are you going to say? If you said, I'm still hot, look into my eyes, that would not be a good representation of the hotness that you used to have. If you said, look into my eyes, I'm still hot, that wouldn't compare to your past beauty. This is the start of a question. So it's hard to interpret this line on its own. We have to look at, again, the bigger picture and the following lines. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use? If thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count and make my old excuse. Essentially, it's saying, how much easier would it be to throw back to how hot you used to be if you could point to your hot child and be like, we share DNA. They're hot. When I was their age, I was that hot. Proving his beauty by succession thine. My hot kid, because we share DNA, shows exactly how hot I used to be. It's proof. How much easier would it be to show how hot I used to be if you could say, My hot kid can show you how hot I once was, showing my hotness because we share DNA. Let's look at that final rhyming couplet. This were to be new made when thou art old. This is like being young again when you're old. And see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. I think that's my favorite line in this whole sonnet. And see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. I think that's my favorite line in the whole sonnet because in the first line we talked about 40 winters. And now in this last line we're bringing it back to the cold of the winter. But not just the cold of the winter, it's the cold of our blood. What happens when we get old is eventually we die. Eventually our blood, our bodies are cold. So this last line to say that we'll see something hot when we're feeling cold, when we know that our time here is over, we have that child, that youthful energy to make us feel like our life is continuing even after we're gone. This is like being a new person in old age, and you get to see/feel young when you're dying. I think the only thing left to do is read the thing with some kind of understanding. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed of small worth held. Then, being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use, if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by succession thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. So here we have another sonnet where Shakespeare is telling all of the sexy people to go make babies with one another. I really don't have a whole lot to say about this sonnet. I think it's fine. I think there's some good comparisons between like being cold and dead and the 40 winters. I think that part is lovely, but I also don't really agree with the message. Solid 2 out of 154. So thank you for joining me as we work through Sonnet 2. Hopefully there's something more interesting to talk about in Sonnet 3. Hopefully there's something dirty in it. Like, I'm ready to get nasty, you know? We're talking about procreation. Let's get dirty, Shakespeare. Come on. Liketh and subscribeth, and we'll find out. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this sonnet. Did you like it more than I did? Do you have any general Shakespeare questions that we should talk about in a future video? Let me know. I need to let the cat in. Come on, Ben. Little won't come in. What can you do?